In this video, you'll learn 10 Python one-liners, which are essentially small Python snippets that are extremely useful, allow you to write better and more efficient code, and will demonstrate that you know Python better than most other people. So with that said, let's get into it and start with snippet number 1. The first one-liner on my list is the following, which allows you to flatten a nested list. Now this involves using nested for loops to iterate through all of the different objects inside of some kind of structure and flatten them. So here's the snippet right here. You can modify it, of course, but just note that you can create a list comprehension, which is essentially a for loop inside of a list like this. In this case, we've done 2 for loops. So we have every item for sublist in nested for item in sublist. So we're looping through the entire structure, then we're looping through each item in the substructure and creating an item for that, in this flattened list. If you have a quick look at an example here, you can see that if we have a matrix, we can flatten it quite easily by using this, and we get the following result. And if we look at something where we don't have even elements, right, so maybe A, B, C, D, E, F, something like that, same thing, we don't need to know the size of the structure, we can flatten it by using this. So if I run the code here, you can take a quick look at the output where you can see that we get the flattened lists. The next snippet on my list allows you to swap 2 variables, or actually any number of variables, in place. So quite often we want to swap the 2 values of variables, and in Python you can actually just do that in one single line. So you can write something like a comma b equals b comma a. And the reason this is quite useful is because normally if you wanted to swap values, you would need to write something like I have in the demo. So you would say something like temporary equals A is equal to B, and then B is equal to temp. And you've kind of unnecessarily created this variable, and you've used 3 lines to perform the swap. And of course, this gets even more complicated if you want to swap multiple values. So you can simply write them separated by commas, and you can see that we can do a basic swap like so, or even a swap using array elements. In fact, this syntax actually works with almost all different types of Python objects, and if I just quickly run the code here, you can see that of course we get the correct values where they've been swapped. But if we wanted to, we could even add something additional, like we can say AR add 2 is equal to, and then whatever value we want. It doesn't really make sense here, but we could do something like, array at 0, and if we run this right here, you'll see that again this still works. So you can do multiple elements, again all in one line without having to create any temporary variables. The next one-liner on my list is the following, which allows you to read a file into a list of lines. Now I use this quite frequently. I'm always opening up different text files, JSON files, etc., and needing to read them. Now you can manually parse the file if you would like, but you can also use this fancy split lines method, which is really why I'm showing you this snippet. So what does this do? It opens a file, reads all the content, and splits it based on the new line characters. So this also avoids keeping the \n character at the end of each line, which is commonly something you need to parse out when you're dealing with files. Now this is useful for config files, log files, etc. And as it says here, if you were using this in production, then you would open the file using the context manager, but it doesn't matter. I'm just showing you how it works here. So you can see that we can import something like pathlib, we can write some text into a file, and then we can open it up with the split lines method. And when we do that, we get all of the lines cleanly inside of this list without any of the new line characters. Moving on, the next one-liner I have for you has to do with the counter object from the collections module in Python. If you're not familiar, Python has a built-in module called collections, which is extremely useful and contains all kinds of different classes and objects, one of which is the counter, which allows you to automatically count different structures in Python. Now, while this is 2 lines, really the one line is this after you import the counter from collections, and let me quickly show you what it does. So you can see that if we have a bunch of different values here, a common thing we may want to do is count the frequency of those. Now, in order to count the frequency, we could write a for loop, loop through it, create a dictionary, for example, and set all of the values, or we can simply use this counter from the collections module. When we do that, it will actually return to us a counter object, which is very similar to a dictionary that contains all of the keys, which are the values inside of the list, as well as their frequency or the number of times that they occur. And then we can use methods like most common, and this gives us the first most common element or the second most common element, and there's a lot of other useful methods there as well. So if I clean this up and just run this code, you can see that we get the counter object like so. You can see we get another counter down here. In order to use the counter, you do need a list. So in this case, what we have is the cat sat on the mat. We split that into a list based on the spaces, and then you can see it gives us the frequency of the words rather than just each individual letter. Extremely useful. A lot of other stuff comes from the collections module, so make sure you check it out. Now, quick pause, because if you're watching this video, you're clearly interested in Python. And if you want to go way deeper than just one-liners in this video, then you need to check out this completely free event, which is Python Unplugged by JetBrains. Now, it's a completely free online Python conference that's happening March 4th from 11 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Central Time. So you can literally watch it from your couch for free. Now, the lineup they've got for speakers is pretty stacked. You've got Carol Willing, who's a core developer on Jupyter Lab. You have Travis Oliphant, not sure if I'm saying that name correctly, who's the co-creator of NumPy and basically one of the reasons that Python is dominant in data science. And you have Sheena O'Connell, who's doing really interesting work in Python education. Now, the topics cover everything from AI and data science to web development, open source, core Python, and really the whole Python ecosystem and where it's headed. So whether you're getting into Python or you've been writing it for years, there's something in there for you. And again, this is free. It's online, and I'll drop the link in the description so you can register. Big shout out to JetBrains for being a long-term partner of this channel and making us aware of opportunities like this. Again, link in the description. Now let's get back to the Python one-liners. Now, the next one-liner that I have may seem pretty basic, but I use it all the time, and this is reversing a string or any iterable object or sequence. Now, in order to do that, you can simply use the : -1 inside of the indice or index operator, whatever you'd like to call it. And the way that this works is that you're using something called a slice in Python, and the slice looks like this: start, stop, and then step. But if you don't include the start and the stop value and you just include a step value of -1, effectively what this ends up doing is just reversing the entire sequence. So it means start at the beginning, stop at the end, and then step by -1, which means go in reverse. So you end up getting a reversed sequence. Anyways, I'll show you what I mean. If we have a look at radar and we run this, we'll see that it's equal to the same if we reverse it. The reason for that is that it's a palindrome, so we could check if something's a palindrome using this. We also could just reverse something. So if I run this here, you'll see that we get the reverse string. This works on numbers. It doesn't need to be a string. It works on lists, really anything that has some kind of order and that is an iterable object in Python, you can run this slice operator on. So now we move on to conditional assignment. This is essentially an inline if or else statement. This is very useful when you want to write a short condition in a single line and have it equal to some kind of variable. This just cleans up the code, makes it a little bit easier for you to see, and can also be used inside of things like list comprehensions where you're writing in a single line. So you can see that you can write something like even if some condition is true, otherwise the result. So essentially whatever you want to have on the left, if something is true, and then otherwise you have the other option. Again, this is an inline if or conditional assignment like so. So for example, we could label something as even or odd. So x is equal to 4. The result is even if x mod 2 is equal to 0, otherwise odd. We could take a min, max, or default value, so clamping some particular value. So score, if score is less than 100, otherwise 100 plus, right? And it just saves us a few lines of code. It makes the code a lot easier to read. Now, the next one-liner is similar and something a lot of people don't actually know that you can do in Python, and that is to write a chained comparison. So if you have a look at this quick example here, if you wanted to compare if A was less than B and B was less than C, what you would need to do typically is write this compound condition like this, where you have A less than B and B less than C, and these are two separate conditions. Now, this works, it's totally fine. However, if you just want to write it a little bit cleaner, you can write something like this. So if you want to see if one particular value is between two values, you can simply just say if 1 is less than x, which is less than 10. And this allows you to check it without writing two separate conditions and is a little bit more clear to read. So you can see if a number is within some range, and then you could also do something like check multiple conditions, is I less than 0 and is I less than n. So if we run this, you can see that this works and it's valid syntax. Now the next one-liner allows you to create a comma-separated string from any list or iterable object. Now this is by using the .join method, as you can see right here. The way the .join works is you take some kind of delimiter or separator, so in this case we have a comma and a space, and then you join a bunch of objects from a list into it. What this will do is it will create a new string that contains all of the values in whatever you've put here, so whatever like the list is that you've put here, separated by this. So separated by a string, or separated by a pipe, or an A, or a dash, or whatever it is you want to separate it by. Now, the reason why I've used the map here is because we might have some values that aren't a string inside of our list. And if we want to join them, we do need to have strings. So what we could do is we can map all of the values from some list to the string function. This means it's going to convert it into a string. Then we pass this list of strings and join them together using the comma. So you can see we could take a list of numbers and we could combine them together with the comma. So if I run this, you see we get 1, 2, 3, 4. If we change this to something like a pipe, you can see now we get them separated with a pipe. If we add another value, now we get them spaced out. And then same thing down here. If we already have strings, then we could just join them together without using the map function. Now the next one-liner I have for you is an absolute essential, and this is pretty printing any nested structure. Now in Python, there is this pprint module. It allows you to bring in the pprint function. Pprint stands for pretty printing, and what this will do is give you a nicely formatted object so that you can read it a lot more easily if you're printing it out to the terminal or the console. Now this is especially useful when you're working with API requests or API responses, or anything that's just very kind of difficult to parse without having it in the correct format. So for example, we might have this large JSON object that we receive. Now before we pretty print it, let's just print it normally so you can see what it looks like. So if I just print out the data and I run this cell, you see that we just kind of get it in one line, and it's practically impossible to read. Whereas if we pprint it, so let's do it like this, and we run the code, you can see that it will automatically format it for us. And we can also specify parameters like the depth, so the number of levels that we want to print out, as well as if we have a look here, the indentation, the width, compact, all of that kind of stuff, so that you can read it in the terminal a lot easier. Very easy, just import pprint and then use it for any kind of JSON object you want to parse. All right, and the last one-liner is one of my favorite ones in Python, and this is effectively an Easter egg that was brought into the language that a lot of people don't know about. If you try to import braces from the future module or the dunder future module with 2 underscores, you're going to see what happens is that it actually gives you a custom exception that says not a chance. Just kind of a fun one. Python actually has a lot of other Easter eggs like this as well. For example, if you wanted to see one, you could try to import the anti-gravity module, and let's just move this and run. And you'll see that what it actually does is it opens up a web page here that gives you a kind of comic about Python, which is funny. And there's a few other Easter eggs as well, but I just want to throw that in at the end to give you guys something to smile at. So anyways, that is it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.